Hey, Nikki here, and welcome to my three-part series on deadlifts. So this is part one. We're going to specifically talk about the dumbbell deadlift, how to set it up correctly, how to do it with good technique, and also how you can do small adjustments to your form that might affect how much you feel it, for example, in your hamstrings versus your low back versus your glutes. We're going to do the exact same thing in part two, but we're going to be looking at the barbell deadlift. And in part three, we're going to be talking a little bit more about why, for example, you might feel your lower back versus your glutes in a deadlift, when it is or is not a problem, and some additional factors to keep in mind if you're trying to troubleshoot that particular lift. So with that, let's get into the setup for the dumbbell deadlift. A quick overview here before I even start demoing. If you're not familiar with the deadlift, I'm assuming you are if you're watching this video. It is a hinging exercise. And the idea here is we are trying to target the posterior chain of the body. So that is going to be like hamstrings, glutes. And yes, it does actually involve using your lower back and your lats a little bit. And so my first point here is that depending on your experience with the deadlift and also your proportions, some people might feel their lower back a little bit more and they might feel their glutes a little bit less. And that's not always a problem. I don't want to go too far into it in this video. But what I want to say here is if you are brand new to deadlifting and you feel some soreness in your lower back, but it doesn't feel like sharp pain and it goes away after a day or two, it might just be that you are new to that position. Now, if it's really uncomfortable, you can always dial back the weight, but that's just something I want you to keep in mind here is that your low back does have to work in a deadlift. Now, that said, and we're going to get into the technique now, how you set yourself up may affect how much you feel, like I said, glutes versus hamstrings versus low back. So first thing here is you're going to have your dumbbells. If you are using heavy dumbbells, a little pro tip here, picking them up off of the ground already is going to put you in a less advantageous position than if you pick the weights up and you set them on something like a box or a bench and then you pick them up from there for the setup. So just a quick note, if you're getting into using heavier dumbbells and you're struggling to get them off the ground, bring them from the ground to the floor first and then pick them up. So we're going to grab your weights. You're going to want your feet about hip width apart. And then if you are a knee hyperextender like I am, the first thing you might want to do is just soften the knees a little bit. So my shoulders are back, my lats are on. Now I'm not popping my ribs, but I am connecting into my back muscles and my elbows are straight, but I'm really squeezing my weights here. And then I am just going to think about sliding the weights down my front, only as far as I can go without rounding my back or losing my lats. So I am really keeping a flat back here. Gaze can be slightly forward. And then I'm going to stand back up. So again, knees are soft, butt to the back wall. Notice my knees are going to have to bend a little bit to do this. And then standing up. So a couple things here, like I said. First thing I want you to notice in your deadlift is that if you have really stiff or tight hamstrings, there's going to be a point at which you don't have hamstring length anymore and you end up having to round your back. So you might have to stop. Ideally, you stop before your back rounds. So that's the first thing I want you to notice. The second thing I want you to notice is if you let the dumbbells drift forward, this is going to put more work on your lower back. Versus if you keep your lats back and you keep the weights close to the legs, that is going to make it easier to engage more glutes and back of body. Also notice here, if you want to see it from the front, my chest is open. My knees are just tracking forward over my toes. So that is going to be the basic lift. Again, it does help if you are able to really think about keeping your arms back without bending your elbows. So that's the first tip. The next thing to keep in mind is for some of us, this position is just really hard to be in. We don't feel like we have a lot of room or places to go. And again, if you're kind of in the tight hamstring, tight hip club, tight back club, it might be that you are someone who would benefit more from a sumo stance. So in the case of the sumo stance, your legs are going to be out a little bit wider, toes slightly out. Again, knees soft, chest is open. The weights just go between the legs, and then you're going to stand up. So sometimes just taking the legs out wider is going to help you feel your glutes a little bit more and maybe help you feel your low back a little bit less. So again, This is just a more advantageous position for some people in terms of their bony proportions. The final thing I want you to keep in mind here is how much knee bend you have. So we're not bending our knees a lot through the deadlift. That would be a squat pattern. But if I keep my knees really, really straight, this is sometimes called a stiff leg deadlift, this is going to use my hamstrings and my low back more. If I soften my knees and I allow them to be a little bit bent, this is going to feel my glutes a little bit, or help me feel my glutes a little bit more. So those are really the main setup tips I have for you with the deadlift. Final thing here is, especially when we start lifting heavier weights, it is incredibly normal not to feel any of the target muscles when you're doing the exercise. So if it's one of those things where the weight feels heavy, you feel a lot of breath, you feel tired, you finish and you're like, I could have only done like maybe 2 or 3 more, but I didn't really feel like the muscles burn, that doesn't mean that anything is wrong. The same thing is if you are doing heavy deadlifts, but you've been doing them for a while and you don't feel sore afterwards, that also doesn't mean anything wrong. It just means you're well adapted for the exercise. So really, I would judge my progress more on, am I able to do the exercise with an appropriately challenging weight with good technique? Do I feel appropriately tired at the end if I'm not a beginner? You're a beginner, use as light a weight as you need to, but also know that if the weight is too light, it's kind of hard to feel where you are in space. So you might need to go up in weight a little bit. And then noticing, are you able to recover at the end of it? So, and are you able to progress in the weight over time? So those things all matter more than how much you feel a certain muscle group during an exercise, and also how sore you are afterwards. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you found that helpful, and I will see you in part 2.